we can begin our community circle. So often this time of year, we talk about Passover and Easter and the things that come up with that, of sacrifice and religion and different things. But this year I was inspired by April Fool's Day, which I have strong feelings about personally. So I would like you all to, just in your reactions tab, give a thumbs up if you, you can't give a thumbs down? You can if you go to the...
You click the reactions button, you can do it.
Okay. If you click the reactions button, this, and the
I just put my thumb up. You'll see. Yeah.
Oh, you have to scroll down. The thumbs down is hard to get to. I did not realize. Wait. What's easier than that? There's. All right. Give a. Do you have the same choices I have? Yes. So I would like you, if you someone who enjoys pranks, I'd like you to give a thumbs up. If you are someone who dislikes pranks, I would like you to do the open mouth face. That's easier than or a thumbs down if you know how to do a thumbs down, but I don't. But so if you love pranks, thumbs up. If you are dismayed by pranks, open mouth face. I'd like to know, or thumbs down, whatever works for you. Or you can just use your thumb. I believe I can see everyone today. So yeah, you can just thumb up or thumb down as well. Whatever works for you. 1A split. So we do have a split. Mm-hmm. Give people.
You know that emoticon doesn't last long. So
it seems to have gone. Yeah, it
disappears after about 10 or 15 seconds. Okay.
But we saw a definite split. So now I'm going to ask people who want to share. If you're someone who loves pranks, I want you to tell me about a prank that you. Oh, we have a thumb up and a thumbs down in the meeting house. It looks like. I would like to hear. So if you're someone who loves pranks, I would like to hear about a great prank that you have either done yourself or experienced or heard about that really made you laugh. And if you're someone who hates pranks, either share about a time when a prank went wrong that made you dislike them, or just why they make you uncomfortable, why you don't like them. So if you would like to share, please raise your hand in Zoom and let us know which side you're on, and give us your example or your reason. All right, Richard Askins, did you want to share, or are you just thumbs upping? If you'd like to share, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sorry about the thumbs up. I went to the wrong icon. No, I in general, I don't like pranks. They have to be pretty specific and pretty non-aggressive, and that, or sophisticated, I should say, sophisticated and not too aggressive, and that's not easy to do. The reasons, I'm sure it's personal for everyone. For me, it's that when I was a kid, things were very chaotic. There were often nasty things and abuses going on, and sometimes they were surprising. There was a lot of shame too from my father. So I don't like it, and therefore I don't do it. But I have on occasion seen a prank that I thought was good, but it has to meet a very high standard for me.
And I should say, we're not here to judge people's experience or opinions. We will get into later a bit of the ethics around it, but right now you're just sharing your own experience. So of course, right. If you dislike them, that doesn't.
Yeah, 90% dislike, 95% dislike. Like that.
But that, we're not trying to judge people who do like them. We're trying to understand. So please.
No, I think I can understand it, but it's not me.
I just meant for other speakers so that they can feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you for sharing. All right, David, why don't you go ahead and share what your opinion?
Yeah, thanks. Basically agree with Rich Askins. The problem with pranks is they're usually mean-spirited in some sense, although the prankster, it treats it, they may not recognize it as mean-spirited, but they usually are. And so I find them very distasteful as a rule. That's all I wanted to say.
All right. Ed?
Yeah, my chief complaint about pranks is I just generally don't find them funny. I love all kinds of humor, but that it doesn't much amuse me. But I will tell you that this April Fool's Day, my almost 10-year-old grandson decided to do an April Fool's trick, and he took a piece of cardboard, big piece of cardboard, and he wrote "Free Monkeys" on it and put it on their front door, thinking that people would come up and get a laugh out of that. And his mother saw it, and she attached a picture of each of her 2 children to it. So he has 3 pictures. So that's funny, but it's not really a prank, but it is April Fool's joke.
That is pretty good. I would love to hear some full-throated enthusiasm about pranks as well, but someone in the meeting house would like to share? Unmute, please, Eric.
Oh, hi, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, good. So, I am of 2 minds about pranks, and agree with some of the earlier comments that they can be, mean-spirited and things like that. But one of the things that I will say is that when my kids were young, I used to love to let them pull pranks on me. And I would go out of my way on April Fools to think up a good prank that they could play on Dad, right? And of course, as Dad, I always like, oh, you got me. Because I found it for them, it was very empowering in that way. They put a fast one over on Dad. And they just would laugh, and that was the most happy sound that I could ever imagine. And I did that when I was a kid. My mom in particular would do that for me. I can remember once she made these beautiful sundaes on April Fools out of shaving cream. And my dad being the guy he was, he took a great big mouthful of shaving cream and then, spit it out, and we thought he was going to gag to death right there on the floor. And all of us kids, we loved it. And so I think a lot of it is really depends on the circumstances. So that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, would anyone else like to share? Oh, Carol, please unmute yourself.
Hello. Okay, I think I'm with Eric on this. I think it depends. I don't like mean-spirited pranks. I think that they're just not funny. But some of them, I'm not sure where it comes from psychologically, but some of them I find amusing, especially the ones that may require revenge. And that is where there's actually these 2 radio hosts, I can't remember who they were, who used to do this funny thing where a girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife would catch the other one cheating, and they would send they would send them flowers, and then they would call, and the spouse would, let's say for instance, would be on the other line while he's talking, or the girlfriend would be on the other line, the other one, where they would think that it came from them, and then the other one would be there, and it was this whole big hullabaloo where they got caught red-handed. And for some reason, I don't know why I find that amusing, but I did. Yeah, so that's all I need to say that's all I want to say about that.
Thank you. I see Pam has shared in the chat, we hit an alarm clock in our math class and made it go off 15 minutes after the beginning of class. And the teacher thought the bell was real and dismissed us. So that prank must have been enjoyed by the other students very much. Our cat is sitting on our notes. So that's her prank on the Ethical Culture Society. All right, does anyone else want to share either a great prank or a terrible prank? All right. My favorite April Fool's tweet this year was thoughts of dog. I was not a very good boy today. Just kidding. I was a very good boy. Or April Fool's rather than I was a very good boy. Terrible delivery. Sorry. Meeting House has a hand up again.
So yeah, can you hear me? Good.
Yes, sir.
So I'll just say that the pranks that I have tried in the past have just as often backfired on me as worked well. And I'll just mention one that I'm not entirely terribly proud of. But I will also say it's really much better to do these with family and friends who will forgive you as opposed to people you work with. This was earlier in my career, and I was working in compliance, and I thought it would be kind of a good joke to make up a somewhat fake subpoena and send it to my boss, who was the compliance officer, requesting that she produce all records, documents, etc. And then at the end of this fake subpoena, I wrote, a failure to do so will result in you being tickled with cushy pillows for until you succumb. And little did I know that she was not going to take my joke in the spirit it was intended. And let's just say it was potentially a career limiting move, as they say. So I learned a little bit about the dangers of, maybe my sense of humor, if nothing else. Fortunately, so 4 days later, she had been actually preparing to provide her notice, which she did 4 days later.
Oh, no.
Because of my joke. But it certainly didn't help the transition afterwards. So, lesson learned.
All right. Thank you. Kurt, you wanted to share.
Yeah. When I was a young man, just graduated from college, I went to work for a construction company with my degree in philosophy. And the two men who ran the building were kind of just surprised, I guess, by their own success. They should not have been successful but they were really, really good at what they did and hardworking. They're terrible business people. And I kind of helped save their business a little bit and kind of put it together. But they pranked me nonstop, like all the time, every day. There's always some kind of silly thing that they would do. And at the beginning, it was a little annoying. And I think that when I thought about it, I thought in their way, that was the only way that they could say how much they appreciated me, because they went to all the trouble to prank me all the time, including hiding underneath my desk one day when I sat down, they grabbed my feet or something like that. And just kind of silly things. And, pranking can be very mean and very cruel, but it's for some reason, for those two particular gentlemen, construction workers who own this business, I think it was their way of saying appreciation. So I guess they were paying attention to me. So yeah, I didn't mind. I thought it was funny.
I wonder, building on what Eric shared, if it's part of, if pranking is something you do with your friends and family, it was a way of them saying that you were part of their close circle. Maybe that is part of the role of pranks. I don't know. Hadn't thought about it before. Anyone else want to share on this topic? All right. So interesting, a lot of people mentioned either that they, Eric's example where he intended something to be funny and it didn't work. Or where other people thought something was funny and you didn't think it was funny. So how do you know something is going to be funny before you say it or before you do it? How do you determine that it's time to tell a joke or play a prank? And that what you're going to do will it cause that reaction in the people around you. Kurt says something out of the ordinary, something unexpected. Yeah.
You know, I heard a New Yorker cartoonist interviewed, and he said that all cartoons are one of two kinds, and I think this applies to most, if not all, jokes also. Either a completely unexpected situation with a normal picture, or a completely normal picture with a bizarre caption. And every time I look at a cartoon, I analyze it. I quickly say, does this follow one of those patterns? You know, so for example, in the New Yorker cartoons, in the back page where they have that one for users to submit captions, it's really apparent there. So like they recently had one with a guy wearing a suit of armor sitting at a table while his secretary came in and was talking to him, and you had to come up with a caption. And of course, it would only be a funny caption if it was something normal, but right? So anyway, it's not quite what you asked, but it's close.
No, that's good. Yeah. Ed?
Well, I spend a lot of time, I love to make people laugh. I should start with that. And so whenever I'm talking to someone, my brain is on two paths. It's on the path of trying to be helpful and understanding and taking seriously what the person is saying. And at the same time, I'm looking for any opportunity to say something silly or unexpected that will make somebody laugh. And how I judge that, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. I mean, obviously, you just get a sense. Sometimes it's too serious. You get the person you're talking to just will be annoyed if you distract them with something silly. And sometimes it's a friendly conversation, and you know that anytime you can interrupt with something that bring a smile or a laugh, it's appropriate. But boy, that is one tough thing to parse, as the way you asked the question. I'd be surprised if anybody could come up with a perfect answer to that one.
Oh, I have to continue your mic.
Yes.
Right. Well, part of the reason why we, came across this is that there's actually a place called the Humor Research Lab at the University of Colorado, or HURL, because they try to be funny. And the lead researcher there, Dr. Peter McGraw, did a presentation as a TED Talk. If you want to see it, it's about 12 minutes long. It's actually really interesting. And he's pretty funny. But what they came down to, the sort of central focus of a joke that they came to, is that it's a benign violation. All right, there has to be something that is breaking the norm. That's the violation, but it has to be done in a good-natured way in order for it to be funny. So, like what you're saying, what David was saying with the New Yorker cartoon, right? If it's a normal picture, like a picture of a hammer, let's say, but the caption reads, "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill," then that's benign and a violation, because it's the, the violation is of the picture is not what you're talking about. And it doesn't hurt anybody, and it's something we can all laugh at. So, in finding when is something going to be funny, you have to sort of look for that confluence of good-naturedness as well as a norm to break, right?
It's interesting though, Pam, to put in the chat, how about when my cousin put a paper on my back that said "kick me," which I believe was in response to my saying that pranks can be saying someone's in your inner circle. And maybe pranks are more about defining who's in and who's out, so that a prank can be inclusive, but that prank is everybody else is in on the joke, right? Everybody else knows that your back says kick me, Pam did not. So it was forming a group of everybody else at the expense of Pam. So certainly a very mean prank. But it is interesting in terms of the group dynamics of it, and why some people find it funny. The people in on the joke find it funny because they feel connected to each other, I think, in some ways, which doesn't excuse it, but I
Well, also
think
because it's not happening to
understandable.
them.
Right, I
So
think
there's
it's
that sense of distance from it as well.
but it's part of being, being in the in group, having the inside knowledge of
Right.
of why everyone's doing it.
I think that's a good point. I think a lot of times when you think about good humor versus bad humor, it's whether it's including or it's excluding, right? It is that in group who's kind of making fun of others or telling that kind of stuff, then we all recognize that it's wrong. But if it's playful and makes you feel like the whole group is okay and welcoming and warm and it's inclusive of another, and the difficulty is making that work when you have two different groups who maybe don't trust each other. And
Yeah.
so that's when jokes often don't work. So trust is also a proportion of that too. But I like what you're saying about the inclusive part of that.
Yeah, it's also important to understand how group dynamics work, and that even that being mean, that is how human group dynamics can work. It's important to understand it even when we don't like it. Richard Askins, please unmute yourself and share.
Yeah, I mean, regarding the prank where someone says kick me and puts it on your back and you're unaware, it's complicated because there's context. I mean, if you do it and it's not your entire group and you have no idea whether someone will actually kick them or not, that's mean. If you're in a group that probably no one's going to kick them, it's more amusing. I mean, it's really complicated.
There's still that aspect of finding out later that everybody knew something about you that you were not aware of. That I think
that happens in real life all the time too, though. You don't even need a sign on your back.
Right, but someone has done it to you, and it's why we're so grateful when someone says, your zipper's down, or you've got toilet paper on your shoe, because you don't want to walk around like that for hours and have everybody laughing at you, or feel like everyone might have been laughing at you.
I don't
Ed.
care much about that anymore.
Ed, go ahead and share, please.
Well, I'm curious what Kurt would say about satire, because it seems to me that satire breaks the rule that Kurt was outlining there. That satire is humor that is at the expense of people who the satirist feels need to have fun made of them, and to make a point about how, by taking what someone's done to maybe a ridiculous extreme, to expose the fact that they are behaving badly.
Well, I think part of that comes from the, punching up versus punching down. And satire at its best tends to be punching up, right? You're satirizing the elite, the administration, whatever. What's that?
Powerful.
The powerful. Thank you. In order to point out the problems that are going on with the way that they are using their power. And so in that way, you're using humor in order to, bring about some kind of change or some kind of acknowledgement of a problem. So in that way, yeah, there's humor, but it's you don't satirize someone who is powerless. It's not fair. Whereas someone who has power, they should be able to take it, and they should be able to understand it and where it's coming from.
Well, and again, in that sense, you're making fun of them, but only because they are so powerful. So we all know that when you make fun of the president, it is because, or someone who's rich and famous and has a platform, it is an acknowledgement of their power as well. David.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is an interesting thing about satire. I agree with Dan and I agree with Ed. I'm struck by, of course, satire in a political context is extremely powerful as a political statement. But I'm struck by people's inability to see the humor in the satire of a different group with whom they do not share the same political sensibilities. For example, I'm sure everyone here has heard of The Onion, which is generally left-wing, generally has a kind of left-wing position, right? And their satire is largely about some poking fun at themselves, but a lot of satire about the right. But there's a right-wing equivalent of that called the Babylon Bee. And I find some of their stuff extremely funny, even though it's directed at the left. And like The Onion, some of it just falls flat. But I've been really struck at the reaction of friends of mine to some things in the Babylon Bee who just don't see the humor because it's poking fun at a left-wing icon, for example, like Bill Clinton or Joe Biden. Can I give an example of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll see who thinks this is funny. So when Hillary Clinton was running for president, they ran a headline, Clinton campaign hires Bill Clinton to advise on how to reach women. I'm so happy that you, I'm so happy.
That's excellent.
I'm so happy you laughed at that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that one's got layers. All right.
It really does.
It's still hitting.
There's a lot of levels there.
Right. Greg, yeah.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not going to go on video because I'm riding my bicycle and I'm kind of sweaty, but I will share a couple things. I, for one, am part of a group of friends from high school who have incessantly teased each other for 30 years. And we're, all, have kids. Some of us actually have grandkids, and we're all professionals, but we are unrelenting in our mockery of one another. And I've sort of grown up with that sort of thick skin. And now it's become sort of an honor if you're the target on our WhatsApp group of 12 people. If you're the target, in a way, it's kind of an honor. Yeah, sometimes it can sting a little bit, but it's better to be acknowledged than ignored. And with that spirit, I turned 50 last year, and I came up with this idea pre-COVID that I would have a roast and give 5 or 6 people the opportunity to make fun of me for 5 minutes, and virtually no topics off limits. And then COVID canceled that. So instead, my girlfriend put together a game for maybe 12 or 15 people or so, and asked 5 questions of each of them. And some of them were complimentary, some of them were what are things about Greg that annoy you the most. And it was really a great sort of satire and a way to do a roast, sort of off the books. And the last comment I'll share is the funniest comment one of my friends said was when asked, "What's your favorite thing about Greg?" And his answer was pass.
Yeah, but there you go, benign violation right there.
Well, the sort of the moral of the story was that I invited that, the sort of pranking and the teasing, because again, like my comment is, if they chose to say nothing, that would be a bigger message.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ed, go ahead. Yeah. Unmute
Ed, you have
yourself,
to
please.
There. I'm not convinced that punching down is always wrong. And I would think it would be wrong to pick on an individual that way. But I don't know if anybody else knows Jordan Klepper, but Jordan Klepper is a Comedy Central kind of fixture. And he goes around and interviews ordinary people on political issues and lets them make fools of themselves by asking them questions. And I guess that's kind of I never liked it when I guess Jay Leno used to do that too, and other people have done it about just making people look stupid because they don't know stuff. But this, because it's political and because so much of our country that they represent a fair number of people, of millions of people in our country who are opinionated without knowing what their opinion is based on. That's what he makes fun of. So I think that's probably punching down, but I think it's necessary and often funny.
One thing that mitigates Jordan Klepper, in my opinion, and I'm probably going too far in the weeds for anyone who doesn't know who he is, but is that he always gives people multiple chances to understand what they're doing. But yeah, I don't know, because I don't know that those people will ever watch themselves to find out and figure it out and understand it. So it may be, I don't know, interesting question. Kurt, you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word is, I was thinking of as self-deprecating. And I think when humor makes you somewhat on an equal plane with other people, perhaps, or not at the expense of others, that's one of the things that helps, that I like when comedians, I think, get up there and they do a monologue, for example, and then they make all of us feel a little silly about our positions, right? We're all self-deprecating to a certain extent and laughing at ourselves and in a positive kind of way that makes us go, yeah, it is kind of silly that we do that, even if it's something political or something we're crazy about and things like that. And so it takes some of that edge off. I'm often amazed at when people think Quentin Tarantino movies are funny. I don't find any of them funny. People always tell, for a lot of young male friends, they like Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill and Fight Clubs, and he didn't do Fight Club, but it did movies kind of like that, where but they think extremely funny. And I go, I don't understand what's funny about those movies at all. And I don't think violence is ever funny, even if you're taking out the bad guy or something like that, So I think that's where I draw my line is if it's got a movie with a body count, I tend not to watch them. Most movies that people seen, like The Godfather or Reservoir Dogs, I've never seen any of those movies actually. And I've only sat through some of these movies I just mentioned. And so I think if it's got a really, really, really sarcastic, I guess they're snarky kind of humor, I don't find that funny at all. So.
Well, this is an interesting lead into our next question, which is, what are the ethics around telling a joke or pulling a prank or whatever? What are the ethics of comedy? How do we know? So we know, I was, thinking about the recent, I can't remember his name again.
Will Smith and Chris Rock.
With the recent Chris Rock, Will Smith episode, obviously nobody should be hit for telling a joke, but then a lot of people felt that Chris Rock's joke was off base and he should have been, he was wrong to tell the joke. So the question is, when is it actually wrong to tell a joke? What are the rights and wrongs and the actual ethics around humor? When do we cancel someone? for going too far, as we say? Or when should we just reprimand them? Or when should we stand up in a crowd and say, stop? Dan is going to take notes. So, Richard, did you want to share on that, or is your hand still up from the last question?
It kind of relates to the last, but also maybe this. I have a general question. The late George Carlin, I find him brilliant, but a lot of people are very offended by him. Some for very obvious reasons. Others I don't get. And I just wonder if anyone has anything to comment about his unique humor when he was alive. His stuff is still all around.
So in that context or otherwise, what is okay and not okay? Ed, go ahead.
Sorry to be talking so much, but humor is really a big part of my life. So I've thought about a lot of these things. I think that there's a big difference between what's okay in humor for a professional comedian, somebody you're paying to watch, versus something you might say or do in your personal life. I think that we have to give professional comedians as wide a berth as possible. So that makes the line very hard to draw. I mean, there has to be something really mean-spirited and unfunny. I personally, to take George Carlin, for example, I mean, I was a big George Carlin fan. I think that people who were religious in a traditional way would have found him to be mean-spirited about religion. And if they were talking to him in private life and he made fun of their religion that way, I think they'd be right to be upset and say that, you know, you shouldn't talk to me that way. But on stage, that's his shtick, and he is exploring some things that are very important to think about, and he does it with humor. And it's not up to us to say, well, that some people won't find that funny, so you shouldn't do it. I think if enough people find it funny, then again, where that line is pretty far out. It's a very hard line to draw. I mean, I would defend Chris Rock. I think you know, it wasn't a hilarious joke, and he maybe should have known better because apparently there was some backstory there. But listening to the joke as he told it, I thought that's the kind of slightly mean-spirited jokes that presenters in comedians at the Academy Awards tell about other famous actors. He certainly wasn't punching down there, for instance. So again, I find it very hard to draw a line. It's like pornography, right? You know it when you see it.
Yeah, and that's always a question, though, about making fun of a celebrity who's part of another group. I mean, Ricky Gervais says that about his jokes that he made about, well, I can't think of her name, Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner, and saying Caitlyn Jenner is super famous and rich and powerful. But the fact is that his jokes were about trans women, and most trans women are not rich and powerful, and in fact are very, a very belabored group. And so if you made a specific joke about Caitlyn Jenner, say the way she behaves on her reality show, that's one thing. But if you make a joke about, so I guess being back to my original example, if you're making a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith in particular, that's not punching down. But if you're making a joke about people with alopecia, with her as the example, that is punching down. And these lines, as you say, are very, very thin. Carol, I see that you've been trying to raise your hand. Please unmute yourself and share. Did we lose Carol?
I think Carol is got knocked out of the call, although there is a Carol F. I'm not
Connecting
sure
to
if that's
audio.
the
There
same
she is.
person.
Carol, please unmute yourself and share.
Oh, you can hear me? Are you seeing my hand raised?
Yes, I'm seeing it go up and down, which is why I hadn't called on you. But thank you
Oh,
for putting it in
okay.
the chat.
Okay.
That
No,
is,
I just can't see it on my end because I'm on a phone and I'm just
Uh-huh.
thinking maybe it's not showing up. Okay, thank you. Okay, so oh my gosh, I have so many different things to say. First of all, I think humor is really important. If anybody's ever been on a dating website, that's like the number one thing that everybody talks about, having a sense of humor. And I do believe that your humor says a lot about you, how personally you take things, how much of a snowflake you are, whether or not that's on the left or right, how you could see beyond your own views. How well, I mean, and I also agree that I'm not really, I don't love insult humor for some reason. I think that definitely is at the person's expense, unless the person is perfectly fine with it. Like when you see a roast, people go on the roast because they expect to be roasted and they're fine with it. And it's humorous to some extent. For the most part, I don't find slapstick funny, or I don't find, I forgot the name of that show, where somebody's always doing a stunt and getting seriously hurt. It's just never been funny to me. But I know personally, I like dry wit. I like humor attached to intellectual things, political things, cultural things, things that, you have to have some knowledge to be able to relate to. And that's and I just recently watched the Jordan Klepper on Bill Maher, and it was just hysterical when he goes to the Republican conventions, and it's I imagine, or CPAP, and I imagine that most conservatives are not going to find that too funny, but I find it hysterical because they just seem so oblivious and so brainwashed to me, and so unaware of themselves. So I do find that kind of thing funny. I find when you just seem to have a very narrow-minded point of view and you can't see beyond it, and you're just spouting talking points that you don't quite understand. To me, that's humorous. So that's my sense of humor. And pranks generally aren't, but as I said, some pranks are funny when I think you sort of, like I said earlier, when I think you deserve it because you've been kind of a jerk and somebody catches you. It's funny to me. So I think I've evolved into a kind of person that can take a prank at this point. I don't take myself that seriously, unless so I'm okay with it. But I guess knowing your audience is key as well. Before you tell the joke, before you do the prank, know who you're doing it to and how they may feel about it. So I think it's a matter of consciousness, self-awareness, awareness of others. There's so many psychological and personality things involved in with jokes, but we all want to laugh, and that's whatever makes us laugh. It seems like we all want to laugh. Check any dating site, as I said, you'll find that everybody wants to laugh.
Absolutely. Thank you. Elaine and Dan, I see your hand up. Not sure which one of you wants to speak.
That was me. So just following up on and a little bit challenging some of what Ed said about the professional comedian. There's a long history in this country and in others as well of professional comedians really engaging in what I think most of us would consider malevolent stereotyping of people who are on the receiving end of oppression. I mean, so, you know, there's a long, long history in this country of comedians, and you can go back to the 19th century through to the present, although it's more suppressed now, which is a good thing. Like making fun of Black people or making fun of Irish people or making fun of Jewish people at a time when these people had no power, at a time when the idea was to reinforce everyone's understanding that these people were subhuman. And so to say that a professional comedian has more leeway, I think we have to be a little bit more refined about that, and that leeway doesn't go, at least as far as a critic is concerned, doesn't really go. There are some boundaries that I think are reasonable to criticize people for violating. Now, I agree there are fuzzy lines there sometimes, and I think one of the things that complicates things is that there are certain kinds of humor that, especially within population groups, often ethnic groups, but I'm sure this can go on with other groups as well, whether they're defined by sexual preferences or whatever, which as internal self-deprecation are fine, but if somebody from outside the group were to tell the same joke, it would be offensive. And so one of my favorite short examples of that, it's short, so was one, it involves a Jewish family, and there's the grandfather who's an immigrant from the old country is sitting, and it's like, let's say the 1950s, and they're watching a football game on TV. And the grandson is totally immersed in the football game, and he's watching, and the grandfather is looking at these two bunches of people on the field and wondering what on earth is going on. And finally, he turns to his grandson. He says, "No, wie viel kostet der Ball?" Which is Yiddish for, so, how much does a ball cost? Now, as an inside joke, you know, it's the grandfather who can't understand what's going on in football. But if an outsider were to tell that joke, it's playing on the stereotype of Jews as being only concerned about money. And so it's the kind of joke that if it's told among Jews is okay, but if an outsider were to try to tell it, would probably not be okay, unless that outsider, you know, was already known by a group of Jews hearing that person as really trusted and who understood what is and isn't acceptable. So the lines are thin and tricky. But if you're going to play, you know, if you're going to do those kinds of things, you really got to know those lines well and understand them. And that doesn't come easily. And if anyone doubts that, just think of mistakenly in this country, where of course anti-Black racism is the right now the worst and most fundamental form, not the only by a long shot. Don't make the mistake of being on the wrong side of that line in dealing with the Black community. Better to be cautious unless you are really, really well known and trusted by a group, which is very rare for a white person to reach that point, not because it's the white person's fault, but because that's the society we live in. So as I say, this is stuff one has to be very sensitive to. There can be hilariously funny, self-deprecating things, but you got to know which side of that line you're on when you're engaging in that sort of thing.
Thank you. I see Kurt and then David, and then we'll move on to our next question.
Yeah, Dan's talking about all these issues reminds me of the comedians. The guy who was sitting there listening to his opponent go on and on and on and on, and then they asked the question of him. He says, "Yeah, I don't have anything to say either." But I think Dan, you point to something I think really important about that is the power. What is the power? I think the ethics of humor that you're trying to get to, Rachel, is who has the power in that situation and can use it one way or the other. So if it's an out group making jokes about the dominant culture, in a way, it's also kind of a fun way to be playful, but also to hope to make people laugh enough that they can be included. I think the worst thing that can happen is when any group starts to internalize that humor against themselves, right? And because they take in the dominant culture's view of themselves and start doing that. And I think for a lot of groups that's where they slow, kind of draw the line. I've been watching the debate around Dave Chappelle, who I never find funny at all, and his humor around trans people, and it's an interesting thing. And one of his defenses, well, don't tell me what it's like to be an out group. How dare you even think of that? And I'm like, well, there's certain things that you may have internalized that you think are funny that are really not funny because they're about issues of power and what's acceptable in the culture or not. And so rather you internalize it, still doesn't make it right.
Absolutely.
And Dan, I hope you got my joke. I hope it was okay.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with something Dan said. In 1915, Irving Berlin wrote a song called "Cohen Owes Me $97." And it was about a guy named Cohen who on his deathbed, Jewish guy, obviously, is telling his kids to be sure to collect that $97 from Cohen. And of course, that was him making a joke about his own group, but it was also very public. I mean, he wrote this song for public consumption, which today seems amazing to me. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. I'll put a link to it in the chat room if anyone wants to hear it.
Interestingly, on the making fun of ourselves or satire of the group that we are in, Archie Levy is looking at videos of things about different colleges have made, like things Sarah Lawrence students say, things Amper students say, and that's one of the ways she's determining whether she will fit in that group. So it's an interesting use of self-satire to make fun of yourself in public as a way to sort of recruit into the group. I don't have answers to these things. I'm just more questions. All right. So I think it goes without saying in this group that people should not be hit or arrested for making jokes, but I don't.
Okay.
What do we do? What do we do when someone makes a joke that is not acceptable, that violates our ethics? I wanted to sort of collect a list of best practices, because when someone makes a joke that's inappropriate, we don't want to be people who stand by and allow sexism, racism, homophobia, et cetera, to persist. And we want to stand up and not be, be useful bystanders who help the problem. We need to do it in a way that can be heard. And in many cases, we want to do it in a way that's not going to damage the relationship with the person who made the joke. If it's your grandmother, if it's whatever, somebody in your close community. So what do we do? How do we address humor that is unethical in a way that works and doesn't also violate our own ethics? Like, for example, we don't want to punch people. That's a violation of my ethics. And no, Pam, we don't shove it under the wet rug. That is not addressing it. We want to think of best practices for addressing the problem. Let's see. Vito is saying, if the stand-up comedy of a person is too controversial, the person should declare that they do spoken word or give talks. I think that it would be more difficult to silence a spoken word artist than to cancel a comedian. That's interesting. That's a different direction than where we want to go, though. I mean, I think we know that in our community, we believe in free speech, and we fight for people to say controversial things. The question is, when someone says something that we feel violates ethics, but that we know they are intending to be funny, then how do we address that? What are things that have worked for you? Dan or Elaine?
Yeah, you know, I think there are two, probably more than two, but I can quickly think of two different goals here. One is to show to the whole group of people that one is with in that situation that one doesn't approve of it, and that others should not approve of it either. And so they're the sort of public, that's not funny because XYZ may be appropriate. But I guarantee that, you know, 99% of the time, that's not going to persuade, let alone convince the person who made the offensive joke that he or she was being offensive. And I think for that kind of thing, one has to talk to the person privately after. So I think there are two different things, and they often conflict with each other, because once you've confronted the person in the group, the chance that you're actually going to be able to talk to that person privately becomes much reduced, because the person now really resents you. But if you don't confront the person in the group, you're sort of going along with the group's at least uncomfortable feeling that, well, we should let it go. So those two goals don't always sit comfortably with each other, and it gets tricky. You know, I can speak to an experience where I had to deal with a colleague when I was in graduate school who said some things that were extremely stereotyping about Jews. And it took me, and fortunately I worked with this guy enough that after several days, not on and on, but, you know, several conversations with him, I was able to finally, and he thought he was praising Jews in what he said. And after several conversations with him, I was finally able to use some arguments that helped him to see why I was disturbed by what he was saying. He actually came around, but it took some doing, and it took some thought on my part as to how I could communicate that. So, you know, the one-on-one is hard, and you have to know how to give and take as well. But I think it's essential if you really want to work with people to, if you feel that they're wrong, you have to go in understanding your knowledge and sense is provisional as well. But if you're confident, you know, you might actually be able to be persuasive, and you may find that your own impressions change as well. In that case, mine didn't. But you know, you have to be open to that.
Yeah, thank you. Curtis shared in the chat that he likes to make an objective observation without judgment. I don't think the others would think it funny the way you do, which I like, because it acknowledges that you recognize the person was trying to make a joke, but to try to get them to look at the other perspective. All right, Ed, please share.
Yeah, I agree with Kurt there too. I also think you have to, if you know the person, then sometimes it's just a joke. It may be a joke that's inappropriate. It may be a joke that falls flat. It may even be a joke that offends you personally, but there's intention also, right? So if the person's intention isn't, if you know the person well enough to know they're just repeating a joke that probably they shouldn't have, I think that's different than if you're standing with someone like, I think what Dan is describing more, where you're afraid that, where you're concerned that their joke represents a a stereotyping that they subscribe to that you feel is really unethical. So I'm for letting jokes go a lot, but I think where you don't, unless it's this kind of serious thing that Dan's describing, I think Kurt's got the best approach. If you can't just let it go.
My child will just look at me and say, "Don't ever say that on the internet." But all right, Meeting House has its hand raised. I assume that's Eric. Unmute yourself, please.
Can't hear you. Nope. Nope.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that was my joke. No, I wanted to share an experience that I had some years back that ties together a couple of the different threads here. I was in a pub, and the person sitting next to me turned and he said, "Would you like to hear a Mexican joke?" And this was in Southern California, where there were, oftentimes some tensions. Now, this was someone obviously of Mexican extraction. I mean, I could tell he had an accent, and I just looked at him and I said, "Nothing denigrating, please." And it set him back, because the joke that he wanted to tell me was not a joke that maybe white people might tell about Mexicans, but that Mexicans tell a little bit about white people, if you will, right? It was a Mexican joke in the sense that this is a joke owned perhaps by Mexicans that only Mexicans could tell. And, there was a little bit of deprecating humor. But I just looked, I said, nothing denigrating, please. And I think that was the last reaction that he expected to get from someone. He'd tried this, I'm sure, many times as a test. And it set him back a little bit. And he told me the joke, and I kind of chuckled, but, he said, "I like you." And it was really just because I said, I don't want to hear a joke that is going to be denigrating to even, you telling a joke about your own culture. It's just not going to be funny to me. So we ended up becoming, kind of friends after that.
Yes, and
I
I
was lucky
see
that he gave me, a heads up and a warning. Not everybody will give you that warning when they're about to tell some type of a racist joke or something like that.
Yes, and I see things in the chat about censorship and bullying, which absolutely are related topics that we don't have time to get into today, but we should keep those in mind for future community circles. But I think we have come to the end of our time. Do you have anything else you wanted to? All right.